Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's These Lads Are Mental show. On this week, our topic is about being an entrepreneur and a business owner and how to deal with the mental health challenges that come with that.
Yeah, it's a topic that I've mentioned to Sylvia a few times that it'd be worth talking about because I know a lot of the listeners are business owners, or I suppose in this new wave of 2022, what is it 2022? Everyone's looking for a side hustle or running their own business, and it can often look appealing from the outset. So it is worth well knowing what is involved in the whole process, whether you're doing that as a side business or it is your business or you're thinking about it. So
Yeah, it's an interesting paradigm shift because, if you were to look at, like, let's say society 50 years ago, like 10 years ago, like even the term side hustle wasn't even a thing, right? Whereas nowadays, I've actually thought about this before, and I wonder why that is. I think there's a lot more awareness nowadays with people, and people have like big dreams. And I think owning your own business and making it a success is one way where you can kind of create those dreams versus, let's say, working for the man, which previous generations were more content with. Once you could get like food on the table, if you think of the Haslow hierarchy of needs, down the bottom, you've got security, food, things like that. Whereas nowadays, I think people are kind of seeing that, like, hang on a second, I can actually do that, and start an idea, work hard at it, and you can make it happen. Obviously, it's not as simplistic as that or as easy. And when like, let's say with Sue, my wife, and I, we've always thought about doing a business going back like years ago, like, because Nimbus actually, which is our business, which turned 6 this year, which was mental to think about. That's now 6 years old. So if you think about this,
not many, not
ideation,
many, not many businesses will make it past 5 years. It's pretty successful in itself, right?
yeah, but also it's kind of, when you don't, like, we've missed our anniversary. It was 3 years in a row. We had to have somebody else go, didn't you guys open in August? And I was like, oh, okay. It's actually really bad at.
I thought you meant a wedding anniversary.
Oh, fuck. Don't start with that. We missed that as well. We're brutal at things. Vis-a-vis life of a business owner, you just, like, all the minutiae sometimes, like, goes over your head. But that ideation kind of has started way before that. Like Sue, for example, my wife, has had, say, 3 or 4 businesses before we even got to Nimbus. She did a healthy meals snacks to corporates. She did an online 7-day meal plan thing. So she's done a whole range of different things. Like, she also did this business called She Bangs, which was like scrunchies for
Was
your hair.
that a self-employed business?
Yeah, a scrunchies business called She Bangs, which I actually thought was a pretty cool idea. And now, like, scrunchies are kind of like, yeah, they were always around, but like they kind of became cool again not too long ago. So it's kind of like, I think there's definitely a misrepresentation of, one day you'll just want to set up a business and then it will pop into your head and then away you go. And even though there is innovation, creativity, and all those things linked to it, there's still a process, if that makes sense. And we even spoke about this on the ABC show that I was lucky to be part of, Space 22, which is now on.
Oh, you're on TV, mate?
Don't get me started here. You've been liking and commenting on all the posts. No, it's well, on the show, which is about art, and Space 22 is called. And again, going into that, it was a similar enough premise. Like, when you go into that, basically what the show was about was like 7 people who struggle with mental health and using art therapy as a way to, like, adapt to it. And when you go in, there's that fear factor. Like, I can't paint, I can't sing, I can't do any of that stuff. But what was great from a learning perspective was they had experts and Australian artists and musicians and so forth that helped us through it. And the very first thing they did was actually break down the stigma around it, which was, I can't do it. And
yeah, I think you spoke to one of the previous guests about that. I think it was a painting analogy
yeah,
you gave to.
yeah, exactly. And you think, oh, I can't do that. Or even like the last episode on Space 22, which aired on Tuesday, which was number 6. was music, and same kind of thing. We had Eddie Perfect, who was this amazing musician who I hadn't heard of, being honest, before the show. And I got a lot of the artists and so forth. They were like, and today we've got Wendy Sharp. And I was like, yeah, who's Eddie Sharp? Today we've got Eddie Perfect. Who's Eddie Perfect? Sorry, Wendy. Sorry, Eddie. But you guys are legends now in my heart. But yeah, like with the music, you're like, if I said to you today, like, okay, Gary, you've got 2 days to make the song, you'd be like, fuck, don't know where to start, how to do all this stuff. But Eddie broke it down into very basic terms, and if you've got a template as well. So he took Mary Had a Little Lamb as his example. So we all sung Mary Had a Little Lamb to break the ice. Then we had to put our words into the same rhythm. So you could pick what the words were, and then you sung that out. And then he then took away the parameters of like, well, it doesn't have to be exactly like Mary Had a Little Lamb. You can add in another line, or you can change things up, which we did that. And then at the very end, he then did his thing and played his. He said to us like, okay, well, what kind of mood are you going for with this song? And I said, oh, well, mine's a bit, I want it to be serious, but like happy undertones. So then he, obviously this is where he used his skill. He layered some off the cuff music over my lyrics. And like, I actually cried on the show because I was like, oh my God. Now that was like day one. And then day two, to create lyrics for a song that we had to do together collaboratively, he did this really cool thing where he's like, right, you've got a minute to answer each question. And he threw 5 questions at us. So one of them, for example, is like,
I did this. This is the one you did last week. The conversation with.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
You used to get most things. Well, you had a lyric to a song, a chorus to a song.
Exactly. And then we put all that in, and then all of a sudden you had a song. So within 2 days you had a song, and I think it's a bit like that with business. Like it takes years to kind of come up with an idea, to try and solve a problem, find what your purpose is. And people often think, oh, I want to do something, but I don't know what it is. You actually just follow those steps of like, well, what are you trying to solve? Like, what's an issue that you feel you're passionate about? Like, what's your own purpose in all of this? And how do you think you can drive a change? And if you kind of keep mustering and thinking about those things, quite often an idea will pop into your head. And then from an entrepreneurial point of view, like my advice would be like to just start somewhere. Like the first thing you do might not be your end business. And it's like most entrepreneurs, if you actually look back into their history, have failed businesses, like Elon Musk, all those guys, they were bankrupt 4 times over, all this kind of stuff. But you have to take a chance, you have to take a risk. And often when you have mental health, like you're not like you can tend to not be a risk taker. And I could definitely hold my hand up there. I'm very like, everything has to be calculated. I have to have like I don't like getting out of my comfort zone. But you kind of have to, and that's where like Sue and I work quite well, because she pushes the boundaries of the comfort zone, and then you follow suit. But yeah, I think I don't know even what my long-winded point was there, but I think like entrepreneurism doesn't just start one idea, it doesn't start one thing, but you have to start somewhere, and then that hopefully will lead to a place where you can go. And then once you get that started, then it's the old classic, like there's an argument about this, and I don't know what the answer is, but one of the arguments is, do I keep my day job and then do I do my side hustle on the side? And if it gets big enough, then I flick the switch off and I go full hog. And then there's arguments pro and against that. That's kind of like how I did mine. But I also had the safety net of my wife running the business, which kind of allowed me to do that. But then other people will say to you, well, if you don't quit your job and go full into it 2 feet, like how do you expect it to succeed? Like you have to be 100% present. How can you keep a day job and then also try and do things there? So I don't think there's a right answer in any of that. I think it depends on your situation, because I know success stories that have done both ways. I know people who have done the keep the day job, and when it gets big enough, they transition, and vice versa. So
there's a lot to unpack there, mate.
Okay, that's the show.
One minute I was singing "Mary Little Lamb," next minute I'm fucking starting a business. No, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think so. Maybe. I mean, this episode alone wouldn't cover the amount of mental health things that would be involved in starting your own business, even thinking about a business, or whatever it may be. I think a good place might be to start, just to have like a theme for it, would be maybe talking about maybe those people and us two have been there when you're thinking about actually starting, and what you think it might be like, and the doubts that prevent you. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's not for everybody. I think that's something that's probably, I don't want to keep saying social media, but if you're on media a lot, it gives you the impression that just quit a job, go over, get a full-time job, get a full-time business, and it's easy. Do this, and there's this and this and this. It can be, it's not for everybody, because there are different personalities. I'm sure there is a role for everybody, and I'm sure you could find something. But if you've just got one idea and you think, I want to go for this, that idea might not be for you. If you're someone who's like, for me, the big thing for me would be, I like to be sociable. So me not being out and about with people, that's my biggest challenge. But I'm sticking with it. But I could easily see it was a bit of an eye opener for me to go, in your head, you're like, oh, brilliant. Don't have to go and I can be at home, I can go in I want. But then you realise, shit, I quite like being with people and working with people and like collaborating and that sort of thing. That's an outset thing that I didn't realise till I was in it. And then I started digging deeper and talking to other people who are involved, and like, that's the biggest thing that killed me. I spoke to a guy recently who he's doing very well for himself. He was basically a content creator, and he quit his job, went 3 months just doing content creation only. After 3 months, quit. Said, I just went back to a full-time job. It was like, I didn't do it along with this.
Yeah, well,
that was an interesting one.
There's a saying that, you know, if you want to have a success, it's lonely, basically, like running your own successful business, because you're on your own clock, essentially, and that's where like you have the big differences between working in a job and then working for yourself. Is that like there's nobody else that's going to push this or drive this except you, and all the emotions and all the stress sits on your shoulders, and nobody else involved in your business outside of the founders will ever be able to appreciate that level of stress or emotion, and that is a huge thing to bear. You know, like, and there's definitely been times where I've felt like, gosh, I would just love to just go in, put my work hat on, do a good 8 hours, chat to friends, and then go home. Whereas you don't get that. And then, you know, even in the corporate life, the more you go up the ladder anyway, the less social things can be, you know, because when you become a manager or a leader, you start having the flex muscles where, like, I can be a certain type of friend towards you in certain capacity, but then there's a limit. And then you have, like, and that's like part of growing anyway and developing into a leader. But if you're a business owner, that's like even exacerbated even more, because at the end of the day, like, you're the boss, so it's kind of like, you know, you have to bridge that gap, and that is challenging in its own right, between, like, especially when you're starting off, because when you start off, you're just trying to do as much as you can to get things going. You're not that you're cutting corners, but you're trying to do everything off the smell of an oily rag. So we had friends who were working for us, and then that creates more barriers if things don't work. Like, you know, Sue and I are married. Like, that's a whole nother dynamic as well that we can maybe talk about later. But yeah, it is a completely different kettle of fish. Like, when you're now suddenly responsible for, not only like you're the only thing that's putting bread on the table, like regular paychecks, like, that's a huge thing. Then when you start getting bigger, you start employing people. Now you're responsible for their livelihoods. You're now paying their checks. And like, we've come very close to the edge on numerous occasions where you're like, fuck, I don't know how we're gonna like get this stuff paid. And like, you try and go to sleep with that hanging over your head, versus if you're working in a day job where you're just like, oh, I need to do that presentation next week. They're two very, very different things. And as you said, there's the glamour associated with it. Like, you see on social media, people going, oh, I'm living my best life, I'm doing this and doing that. I'm like, you know, people probably, like, I would probably be one of those people as well, where you're like, you're doing this, you're doing that. People go, fuck. Like, whenever I see someone from home,
currently come from, currently podcasting live from Italy.
Yeah, I'm probably being very hypocritical here, considering we've been on a working trip since 5th of May, which is one of the good bonuses of, like, you know, well, now
as you mentioned though, and to give context to that, you are in your sixth year of business and you have had a lot of highs and lows, and you do have to enjoy the success that you've had as well. And you've built it to a point where you can trust other people to do the business. So there's a lot, I'm just taking the piss. There's a lot to that,
Yeah.
obviously.
No, thanks for that context. Yeah, and also there's what we like with COVID, for example, our business, we had to try and digitize to drive scale because we're a bricks and mortar business. So when COVID hit, we were virtually closed for all the lockdowns, and now we're actually expanding the business into other areas where we don't necessarily need to be fixed to the where the studios are. And also, I think it came to an important part of this studios lifespan for them to be able to stand on their own two legs without Neil or Sue being around or any kind of business owner. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you need to be present, and it's obviously beneficial to be present, but you have to kind of trust the process and let go. It's like your children going to school. There's going to be some teething issues and some problems initially, but like, hopefully in a few years' time when we have 20, 50, 100 studios across the world, like we're not going to be in every place every second day. It's impossible, right? So you have to kind of trust the process a little bit on that. So yeah, I mean, they are some of like, that's the kind of the rewards that you can get, which are, you work hard, you build a business, you stick at it and you work on it, then you can do things like what we're doing now, or have the flexibility to make those choices. And there is a lot of flexibility with your own business. Like as you were saying, like if I wake up on a Monday and I don't want to work, like you can make that choice.
I know, but I think that is, to me, is half, and I say mental health battle of running your own business. So you run your own business to try and get away from, as I say, the 9 to 5. But then when you get in your own business, you almost feel guilty if you're not working in the 9 to 5. So for me personally, I'm not particularly productive between 9 and 5. I'm really productive early in the morning, and then I'm really productive late at night. I'm sort of okay floating in between. But I can get a shit ton done in the morning. So really, the 9 to 5 doesn't really suit the way my brain works for whatever reason. I can be hyper. I can get lots of little life admin stuff done during the day. I can work out. I can get the things I don't have to think about. So for me, but then it gets to like, say you sleep in one day and you miss that morning slot. Then it gets to 12 o'clock in the afternoon and you're like, start thinking, I need to get this done. And then that builds up and that builds up and that builds. And then it's a bit of a catch-22 where you're like, well, I'm in this because it's okay. I can spend tomorrow on doing things. I can do it on Saturday. But then you almost don't allow yourself sometimes that enjoyment or that flexibility because you're I suppose you're putting pressure on yourself. But I think that's definitely a learning curve. I'd also think it's something you might never get rid of. From me speaking to people who have been in business much longer than me, something they continuously battle with. But I suppose it's a good thing as well because you're striving probably to get better, improve your business, and make sure everything's okay. But I think striving for that balance. Maybe not when you're getting started because you need to do a bit more doggy work. But I think as you get going, having those people to employ to do things and help you in plan trips, breaks away where you have to escape.
Well, that's one of the Yeah, I think like you're kind of touching on like the kind of boundaries there, and I think one of the dangers with if you do struggle with like any kind of mental health condition, like whether it's stress or anxiety, when you're a business owner, you're never not connected, which is one thing. Like I used to find when you're working in 9 to 5, at least you can kind of leave it at home. Sometimes it'd be something big and you'd be thinking about it. And, that does happen, of course. Or if you're not hitting your targets or something like that, that can hang over. But generally, you can leave your work at home. When you're a business owner, that just that goes out the window. So trying to build your own boundaries, which like 6 years in, like I'm still I'm nowhere near have it right at all, and that's like a really hard thing to do, and to set those boundaries, not just for the business but for your own self. And you do have options when you go into do a business. Like you can go the whole hog and work your ass off, and you hear people going, "Oh, I'm going to give it 5 years, like work my tits off," and blah, blah, blah. But then you start I guarantee those people are probably, I don't know, drinking or like going mental on the weekends to try and get away from it all. So getting that balance is actually it's really, really tough. And then you throw a kid in on top of that, which is hard as well. And how I describe it sometimes with running a business is you've always got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. So even if you are on the Saturday, you go out for lunch with your mates, this is what I think now, this is what goes through my head. I'm thinking about something that's next week that I need to get done, and then I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna be hungover on Sunday, so I can't do anything like that. Then it's gonna be Monday again. Then I'm gonna start getting emails and texts and all the team going, can I do this? Can I do that? And then all of a sudden it's gonna be Wednesday and I'm gonna be out of time. So then that kind of swizzles around your head all the
You
time.
can't do
So even though,
yourself on the Saturday. Yeah.
yeah, so even though you're sitting there at a lunch, like you're not really present with yourself.
Yeah.
And it's the same with going on a holiday, which I know sounds ridiculous, but like when you're on a holiday, like there's always something, there's always somebody, like, and now because we're so connected, like we like, and a lot of these technology does wonders for our business. Like we are on Slack for communications, which works really well. We've got like WhatsApp has a desktop thing, which is like brilliant for connecting overseas. We have all these amazing things, but you know, the whole thing of like people used to say like, oh, wake up in the morning, I'll check all my stuff, and then that's it for the day. Like I struggle a lot with that because the business moves so fast. You wake up and I do that, which takes 30 minutes or whatever. But then you're getting pings on Slack, then you're getting pings on email, then you're getting pings here, pings there. Then there's like, so your team are looking for you, but then you've got like, maybe you've got a journalist who's writing a story who's like, I need images and I need them now. And you're like, if you don't do that, then you miss the opportunity. And then, you know, you've got all those things swirling around, and it gets to a point then where it can become very overwhelming, you know?
No, 100%, mate. And I think from you talking about having one foot in the business and one foot out, it's harder for people often people will start a business based on their own passion or what is a hobby, and they turn it into a business and make money from it. So, I mean, health and fitness would be a big one. Obviously, Nimbus is more in the health and wellness category. Mine's is more sports performance. But for me, on that Saturday afternoon, typically I'll talk about football to somebody. Typically, as soon as someone mentions something, you start thinking of business opportunities in your head or partnerships or these things, and I could go with it. So what should just be a casual conversation about, for me, football, or for somebody else, or what you've been doing in the gym recently, before you know it, you're thinking about who you can introduce them to, who they can introduce you to, how you can build your bit. It becomes no longer a social conversation. It's always, of course, there's plenty of opportunity and it can be a good thing, but it also doesn't allow for that to switch off because your passion and your hobby and your business have just completely merged, which again has got positives, but there is definitely drawbacks to that as well.
And that, like, you try, like, one example there is like, then you add that into a family dynamic where you're working with your partner in and out the business, so everything is like very close, and like, and you're trying, but then you're trying to flick on the intimacy switch, like when it comes 9 o'clock at night, which like I tend to find quite difficult. Whereas like Sue's much better at that. Sue can just let something go for a walk, and she's in like her social mood. Whereas I'm still thinking about that thing, and then you know, and then something's like, oh, give us a cuddle. I'm like, what? Oh, I've got to do that email. Like, so it's like it becomes very the lines become very blurred, and you know, when you add in your family on top of that, which, like, being totally honest, I probably would not recommend it for most people. Like, it's really pushed every orifice of our relationship, both personally, professionally, everything to the real edge. So, but you know, we're still here for now, which is a good thing. But I was going to say, one other annoying thing I find, and this sounds also ridiculous, when you have a business, the first thing people will tend to say when they meet you or see you, especially if you haven't seen you for a while, it's like, how's the business going? And you're like, oh, fuck, about like, it's so.
Let me get my P&L sheet up for you.
It's so annoying. It's like that conversation. It's like, oh, you've got to go through your spiel of like, oh, yeah, we're doing it. Like, sometimes you just want to say, yeah, it's fine.
It's the same as, all right, mate, how you doing? Aye, good, mate, you? It's the same as, how's the business? Aye, no bad. We're surviving. Yeah. Hey. It's just a typical chat.
It's also like, obviously, all those people are being so lovely about it. And
of course they are, exactly.
And they're being inquisitive, and, you know, which is great. Like, they're just trying to be your mate, look out for you and support you. But then for you, you're like, this conversation, you know, well, our 2022 financial report, you know, said this. And then also, a lot of people, like, there's the front cover of what you're doing, which is, you know, social, and everyone thinks it's all roses and gardens and everyone's hunky dory. But it's a bit like it's a bit like an iceberg situation. Like, you show one piece which people see, but underneath your legs are going like fucking 100
Oh,
miles an hour.
100%. I
And
think I think the there's just as we're talking about it, there's just so many things that, like, thinking back to the guests we've had on and then thinking about what we're talking about now. There's so many. I think almost obviously being employed in general or the work life in general comes with its own struggles. But I think as we're talking about being like running your own business or even if you're in partnership with somebody, covers almost every aspect. I think you at some point face almost every aspect of what is potential from the mind. Like, there's so many things that happen and so many tools and tactics from even as simple as productivity tools you use, like maybe apps you use. What's your productivity? Everyone's always obsessed with morning routines or evening routines, but often a good work or business routine, whether it be you got a dashboard, the way you create things, or when you check emails, or when you start work, or how you go to the gym early on, do you go for a walk? All those things really are all about priming your mind to have as good a day possible in your business. As soon as that's done, you know yourself, if you have a really good morning, say you wake up, you go to Nimbus, you've had a big successful day, you've got everything done, everything's clean, you've got a big event coming up, it's all prepared. You probably go home that night. Like, you won't struggle to be in a social media studio that night because you'll be buzzing, everything's off your mind. And it's just all that is, that's a complete mental health thing. How is your mindset dealt with? And it's because you've done things from the business end. So it's just always lingering there. And I think that starts from when you, in fact, it probably starts from the night before in terms of you preparing for the next day and how you're doing it, finding your routine, what works for you. Because some people are busting their arse, they're really trying their best, they're trying everything. They're doing things that don't work for them. You know, we've spoken in the past with people who try meditation, but it's just not right for them. But they think, well, I'm stressed at my bin, I was doing meditation. But that's not working for them either. So it's just this, they're adding more to a conveyor belt that's just never stopping.
Well, I was making notes as you were talking because there's a load of stuff there that was springing to mind. I was just like ding, 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 like, and like this is the really hard part when you're in a business because you hear two sides of the coin. And I've heard this before about advice that you get. Like, you'll ask one person one thing, they'll say one thing. You'll ask another person, they'll say the other thing. So who do you believe? And in businesses, this whole thing, as you were saying, like sometimes like if you're pushing shit uphill, maybe it's time to say like this is not working. And like I kind of that story you were telling about the guy who tried it for 3 months and then quit, went back. Like there's a lot of merit in that because he could have stuck with that for the next 10 years, not been happy and drove himself miserable. And it's a bit like I said, the example with divorce and marriages. Like sometimes, like you hear of like people getting divorced in their 60s, and some people go like, how are you getting divorced in your 60s? You've been married 40 years. But you're like, but yeah, you still could have 20, 25 years left in your life. Like, so why, if you're not happy, like why do you need to stay with it? Which,
Yeah.
thinking of Irish people, I think like that's definitely an old generation thing where like people just stuck with it, even though like couples weren't happy. Versus let's say the pushing through, and I've heard like statistics going, it's only as a business owner, it's only when you feel like you need to give up are you truly in the place where now you can succeed. So you hear things like that as well. And like there's been so many times where both Sue and I have gone, fuck, like I just want to give up. Like this is just too much. Like I can't deal with it anymore. But then when you actually listen to, if anyone's interested in this generally, like one podcast I would recommend is How I Built This by NPR. It's an American podcast by Guy Raz. And he basically interviews entrepreneurs and goes through their whole story of how they got there. But he interviews like mega big people like
You're on it next
Airbnb.
week, aren't they?
Yeah, I wish if I make it, if I'm on NPR in that show NPR at any point, like I've probably got like a multi-million-dollar business, because they only really deal with the top guns. But like Canva is a brilliant success story, an Australian success story. Melanie Perkins, now I think it was valued at something like $30 billion. That like absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I didn't know. Can't do it with her.
But often they all say the same thing, even though all their stories are very different. It's a lot of the characteristics are the same, and most of them will say at some point, like, "I wanted to give up, like I was fed up."
Multiple times.
Yeah, multiple times. So the pushing through thing, like, I suppose the thing is like there is no right answer, but like it does. These are trends that tend to happen, but also like the routine you mentioned there. Like I went to start seeing a psychologist, which is great. I started to open up for the first time, just going back 4 or 5 years ago. And at the time, I was so structured on my routine, which was actually giving me stability. And then when I went through all that work, it was about teaching me to let go of this, which definitely had a purpose and merit. But what I found is when I started to take the routine down and let like be less wound up, which is, there was benefits to that, as I was saying, I got a bit lost then.
Yep.
And now what I'm trying to do is actually get back to the routine. I'm actually struggling a bit now because like I used to be very regimented in almost everything I do. I'd have breakfast at a certain time every day, we'd work out at lunch, like, and that was like my system. And when I got rid of that system, I didn't know who or what I was doing. And now it's taking me ages. Yeah. Well, now I'm like, and then you add in the mix of, you're saying, the flexibility of working from home, not at a desk. And I was like, I couldn't, like, I'm still struggling with that. I was like, I can't get it done.
I understand that.
Yeah. And then like, and then, you try and do something, as you were saying, when you do the kind of smaller tasks, like just proofread something or something like that, that's fine. But trying to sit down and build the strategy for your business going into 3, 5, 10 years with all that, like, it becomes very, very difficult. And then what also happens then is you end up comparing yourself to a lot of other business. So as a business owner who's successful, let's say in your own right, you then compare yourself to somebody else, which is a never ending black hole. No matter how good you are, there's always somebody else who you'll look at and go, fuck, he's doing better than me, or she's doing better than me. And there's, most people know Akabums in Australia. And he's a good example of, like, they're an amazing family, Eugene and Deb, and they have the 2 boys. Amazing Bondi family, very successful business, beautiful photography. He was like the first to do the kind of that style of photography. And you would look at Akabums and go, wow, what? And like, that is, in my mind, the holy grail. Like both parents are in the business. It's local in there, in Bondi. It's successful. And you'd be like, fuck, that's what you would dream of, versus, let's say, running an international multi-corporation, which, yes, would probably
10,000 employees.
Yeah, but and that causes all these other issues. Like Akabums is almost like, in my mind, I wish I had photography as a skill and made it to that point, because like, it's just this beautiful size, beautiful business, and like they do really, really well. But then I'd worked with Huge before and spoken to him, and even though that looks like the perfect business, like he spent 25 years, I think he was telling me, to build what it is today. And even though, to get something to that point, which might seem simple or the perfect thing now, like he was in another job, he told me before, he just started taking photographs, sent them to some of his friends, and then his friends were like, God, you should like send us more of these. And then he started a newsletter, so he used to flick around just casual images to his mates in the area. And then he took the plunge of like renting a space out in Brighton Boulevard up in Ben Buckler and Bondi, and did a launch thing, and heaps of people went there, and then like the rest is history. But I think like it's Aquabums is like a beautiful example of both one side and the other side of business. One side of it, you think, oh, that seems so simple, I can do that, or if I just come up with something, but then the other side is like,
just be patient for 25 years. Oh, no worries, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll go back to my job.
We just see, like, and honestly, before I knew like the Tan family, like I was like, oh yeah, Aquabums, it's like a relatively new business, like probably been going 4 or 5 years. Like that's what I would have hazarded a guess at, not knowing that like his journey into that business took the majority of his life to get to that. So like, again, none of these are the answer. Like every business is different, but it can sometimes, you can see one thing and you don't understand what's gone into that from a legacy point of view to make it the success it is now. It's like it takes so much time to create this beautiful simplicity, which is now your life. So just wanted to kind of flag that with people that sometimes businesses and things like that, like where they are now, like there's more to it, kind of way.
Yeah, I think it'd also be worth noting, because obviously everything we spoke about so far is not negatives but realities of the things to be aware of, or things that the realities of doing it, starting or been in it for ages. And there's people who've been in business far longer than us who would be able to tell us different perspectives, or people who are probably just over it. There is people out there who have struck gold early on and they can tell us a different perspective again. However, I think there's a lot of positives as well. So from a positive side of things, from running a business, we've touched on a few. I mean, for you, obviously having a young one, spend more time with them, spend more time. Obviously, you're working with your missus, spend more time with her. You've got flexibility to go on holiday. But I think also even just that little buzz you get when you do get some success, that's hard to get from a job. The feeling of you've accomplished something, or the feeling of just somebody getting recognising what you've done, or like maybe in yours, maybe someone saying, "Oh, what are you doing?" And we go, "Oh, Nimbus, I love that place." It's like a moment for you. You think that's me that's done that. That's for me and my team that's done that. I think they things are tough to. Obviously, in a job you can do something really well, and somebody can give you a pat in the back. But sometimes in work, often work goes unrecognised, and that's often a complaint with people why they want to leave their work, because they don't get recognised for mundane tasks or things, or big tasks that they put work into. So I think that's a massive positive of being your own boss.
Like if you're in a corporate job, like how many people are listening to this at some point in some job who were killing it, doing a great job, smashed it, but then I don't know, the boss took the plaudits, or you didn't get any financial remuneration for that. Like in one of my previous jobs, I was in a marketing role, so not sales, but my team played a big role in bringing in like the business and coming up with the ideas, but we never got any like commission or anything like that off that. So you bring in like a multi-million-dollar deal and get nothing for it, and then that money is then going to somebody in a different country at a higher plane, and you like, whereas you're on the ground doing all that work. When you think about it in that sense, you're like, and then you flip that to being a business owner, where it's like everything you do, every dollar that comes in is essentially yours. And that should be a huge driving thing. And we've got an amazing mentor in Sydney who's also Irish, and he's been working with us for the last few years, and we've been thinking about buying a house, and then I had redundancy money from my last job, and was sitting there, and he was saying like, well, like, what are you gonna do? Like, how can you have saving when you're trying to make your business like big? If your business goes big, you're never gonna have to worry about a house deposit again in your life. Like that's the sweet treat at the end of all this. So like, going back to that analogy I was saying before of like half being committed, like, I had money in the bank, which wasn't enough for a deposit, but then, he was saying like, well, how serious are you about your business? You're holding on to this bit of money. Whereas like if you put it all in and really make this a success, you'll never have to think about those things again. So it's like, those kind of little kicks up the arse or realizations for you as a business owner are like much needed, because that's the thing, like that's the carrot at the end of all this. Like if you really do make it a success, and if you're thinking about like, should I do this, should I not do it, like there are definitely some indicators I've learned that I would say to people who are listening. Like it's a bit like when you hire somebody. My train of thought when you hire someone is like, if you can kind of somewhat convince them not to do it and they still want the job, that's a good sign. So if you've got an idea in your head, and you maybe have a think about like, well, what are the factors that might stop the success? And if it's still something that sticks with you, and it's the same with an idea. If you've got an idea that has stayed in your head for 5, 6, 10 years, that's usually a good sign that you're onto something. Another little thing, not to stay in the negative, but like just be aware of advice. But I actually think this is like
as you give advice.
As I give advice. So take everything I'm saying to you with a pinch of salt. But when you start a business, right, the first people you're going to ask for advice are your friends and your family, right, and your close circle, which is great. And going back a few years ago, I actually relied very heavily on that advice from your immediate circle. However, just think about this for a moment. The reason why you've solved the problem, or you've come up with an idea, and if you think about the Airbnbs, the Ubers, and all these people in the world, like, you've come up with this idea. Like, there's a reason why they're being successful, because nobody else has come up with it. So if you throw that idea at somebody, most people are going to go, that's fucking crazy. And there's that saying of like, if you want a good idea destroyed, like offer it to your friend, brother, sister, loved one, and they'll tell you a million reasons why you shouldn't do it. And that's the thing I would just like, you've seen the gap, you've seen the idea, and not many other people, if any, are going to actually have the same understanding of what you're doing. Go out there, get all the advice that you need in the world, but at the end of the day, this is a vision, this is a thing that you've seen, and only you, I think, can really see, the woods between the trees. And most success stories would attest to this right up through it. And this isn't just something that happens at the beginning. You think of Apple or something like that, when they went to go to investors, and then, like, look at Steve Jobs. He went to investors, got money, set up Apple, turned into a huge success. But then the board, like, as it grew, the board were like, we don't think you're the right person to drive this. Like, we now think we know better. And they sacked him or whatever. The company started to die in the arse, and then they hired him back again. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, even when it's taken off, and even when it's success, you're still going to get people going, well, I don't think you like need to take it to a better place. So yeah, get my advice there would be like,
my advice, you don't listen to advice.
Yeah, get all the advice. Yeah. My advice, I don't want to be sued here. It's like, well, I heard this on a podcast and he told me to do it, so I went and did it. And my business was an absolute failure. But yeah, like, get all the advice you want, but at the end of the day, like, the decision sits with you, in your gut, in your ear, and you're the only one that can decide to do it. And there's risk involved in it. Of course, like, when we started the business, we took out a personally liable loan of 40,000 Australian dollars, I think it was. Like, so if we had opened doors and it died in its arse, we would have been 40 grand in the hole. Like, and that, like, some people get given money through inheritance and things like that, or parents and so forth. But like, when you're on your own, like, that's, I mean, like, you've got to be sure. Well, you've got to think as much as you can to be sure.
You've got that confidence, definitely, to. But I mean, starting a business on a whim, which, again, I think when you say be cautious of advice, that's when you have to be cautious on social media, because you can scroll for 10 minutes on any social media platform and there are at least 50,000 people telling you easiest way to 50 grand a week, just quit a job, don't give it a 9 to 5, do this, do this, do this, do this. And some people I do know of who have either quit their job on a whim, or started something that probably did have legs, but they'd done it just on a whim without really thinking it through, and they executed it very poorly, and it put them off when they could have probably either kept going with it, or maybe thought about it a bit better and executed it at a better time. And so I do think it's worthwhile to take your time with it, and then be confident. There's going to be doubts, mate. That's another part. Doubts. If you're not doubting yourself at some point, again, I would go and get advice, because you should be. If you go in overly cocksure, I've got the exact solution to this. No, you don't. Like, you don't. There'll be holes in it somewhere. Somebody needs to find those holes, and you might find them yourself by trial and error. But if you're just so cocky and cocksure every single thing, then I don't think that's authentic. I think every person I know who's got a business, successfully or unsuccessfully, has had self-doubt, doubting them, doubting things, having doubts and being challenged is one of the most healthiest things in the world. And I've got certain people who I go to, that'll be mentors of, like, people close to my house. I'll throw an idea and see how they challenge me, and that'll make me think about an idea differently. And then some things you take on board, some things you don't. Some things like, nah, I'm sticking with that anyway. Some things are like, nah, I'll get rid of that. So I do think it's that is worth
well, the whole thing of failure, which is, everyone kind of, the last couple of years has been a lot of conversation on, like, failure is good and all that kind of stuff, which is totally true. Like, you don't learn through success. You learn very little through success, where you learn a lot more through failure. And I know that is gone around the block a bit, but it is a very important thing to note. And you don't often see failures projected from a public standpoint. Like, when a business is successful, they don't go, here's all our failures today, which are, the failures are usually, kept on the inside. But you look at any successful business, there's always failures behind there. And to reference, I say, Elon Musk again, and I'm no fan one way or another of Elon Musk. This is not sponsored by Elon Musk, if anyone's wondering either. But
watch it was, man. That'd be brilliant.
Well, if you do want to sponsor Elon Musk, I know you supported the South Australian energy system there, so why not come to Sydney and sponsor our podcast? But he has the SpaceX thing, which is, I think, even with Tesla and stuff like that, is it still making profits? Like, there's not, all that kind of stuff going on. But with SpaceX, when I watched the documentary on Netflix, first of all, they were told, like, you're never going to be able to do is, like, NASA is the, you know, the be all end all, which was like a government led, you know, company. And they were a commercial business, and they were kind of told like, you know, we won't work with you because like, you know, you're commercial, blah blah blah, which, you know, it's all made sense. But they stuck at it, and they were able to send rockets into space. And then, to give you one example, within that documentary, one of the things NASA hasn't been able to do has been to reuse the engine. You know, that's the thing that like falls off the back when like a shuttle gets into space. And that engine alone, I think, costs the most money because it's like a one use only. And that's why it costs like millions and billions of dollars to do all those tests. And like there hasn't been a massive frequency of humans going into space or onto the moon or places like that since 1969. So what SpaceX did was, well, why can't we reuse the engine? And if we can reuse the engine, then it won't cost us as much to do tests. So we can do tests more frequently, which is better for space, you know, exploration. So they did that, and then they failed. Like if you watch it, like they failed to the point where I think he was down to his last like few dollars. I think they had something like, I think he had 5 attempts or something like that left in his kitty that he could fund. After that, they were fucked. Like they would have gone bankrupt. And I think on the third one or something, they landed it. So basically, they put like almost like these thrusters on the engine, so when it fell off, they then guided it down and then landed.
Yeah, I think that was on the news.
Yeah, so now they've done that, and now because they've done that, now they're working with NASA to do that and that. And now, like, you know, so it's just an example of like constant failure. And if you think about a business, you might try an idea, as you're saying, it might not work. But there's other things like, yeah, maybe the timing wasn't right, or if that idea fails, well, how can that morph into your next idea, into your next idea, into your next idea, into your next idea, into your next idea? So yeah, there's huge learnings to get from all those failures. So if you just think of that, Elon Musk as an analogy of the rockets and how many failures his rockets have to be a success, and how close he came to the edge of sheer bankruptcy. And even if he had gone bankrupt, like, so what? Like, you know, if you're a good person with good values and good drive and good all those energies, if you do go bankrupt, yeah, it's obviously a shit situation. But, you know, if you're not on the edge, like, you know, you file bankruptcy, you move on. Yeah, you can come through. Like, think about you, Gary. Like, Gary's also a business owner as well, just for the record. And like you're in the kind of my envy zone with some businesses, because like if your business goes off, it's the Ackerbums analogy of like, you know, it can be a really nice sweet spot, and to be your own boss and like not to, you know, like there's some really, really good, lovely pros with your situation. But yeah, so my point there was like, so, but let's say it doesn't go that way for you, Gary, and I don't know, there's a GFC and things going, no one plays soccer ever again, or whatever. You've still got your parents back in Scotland, you've got your partner here in Australia, and you've also got transferable skills that you could use in a number of jobs, like, you know. So there's so many levels like between you and like if you think fear, like everyone has that fear of like, I'll be out in the street homeless with no food. Like,
yeah.
You've actually got so many layers between you where you are right now to where you're literally on the street, you know. And so like that's the other thing, like, you know, same with us here, like Sue's mum. Oh, I lost you there for a sec. Can you hear me?
I see you, mate. All good.
Yeah. So like, you know, Sue's mum lives in Brisbane. Like, you know, if Nimbus failed tomorrow and we went bankrupt, we could always go and live with her. And then again, what you don't know is like, even if that did happen, you don't know if that's happened for a good or wrong reason. Like, who knows? Like, if Nimbus failed, we went to live with Sue's mum. Sue could pick up a habit like painting or something like that. All of a sudden, those artworks could be like world famous, and then, you know, I'd never have to work a day again in my life.
There we go. That's the plan.
Yeah, that's the plan. But you know what I mean? Like, you just don't know. And to give guys another example, if you're out there, there's an artist called CJ Henry who's from Brisbane. I think Sue had knew her through school or something like that. I think she was in school, did all that kind of stuff, left school.
That's the artist. The artist is American.
Yeah,
She
lives
Kanye
over
West
in
and
America
all
now. Yeah. She's had like, so she does these she draws with a pen, and it's like looks like a photograph, and she does like boxing gloves and like all this kind of
that. They're
cool stuff.
unreal to be fair.
Yeah, they're unreal. Like you look at it going, how is this not a photograph? But like she wasn't conventional. She didn't go to uni, I don't think, or like there was something like, oh, she didn't do the path that was supposed to be there for her. And now she's like, that's her job. Like she gets sponsored by Bic, who's the pen people. She lives in New York, I think, or something like that. She does
sponsored by Bic.
Yeah. So her the product
What I do,
that she
there's only so many pens you can use, man.
That's, I mean, she probably goes through 1,000 pens to do one artwork, and now she doesn't even have to pay for that because the company, like, you know, like it's a perfect synergy on both sides. Like that's like, do you know what I mean? That's somebody who didn't conform into like going to uni and probably doing all those things. You know, I don't even know her story properly, but like, that's what I mean. You go out and you take a risk. Like there's also like there's so many of these stories.
You talk all day about just stories, success, failures, people who've come out of nowhere, people who failed and came back, people who haven't bankrupt and struggled and changed careers.
But I'll be finished on one thing at this point was like sometimes you need, it's gone back to like the business mentor that we had. I said like you almost need the fear, like you need that to drive you, like that you need that fear of like failure to drive you. And there's a DJ in the UK called Maya Jane Coles, who I think she was like almost on the street, had no money left, and was, I think, in, you know, some commission housing and was literally on the edge. And because she was on the edge, she was like, all I can do here is try and make some music. So her first album she made, I think, out of a bedroom, like off some equipment that someone lent her. And it went off, and now she's like an international superstar DJ. Here we go. That's actually from a Chemical Brothers line. But you know what I mean? Like that fear of her being on the edge drove her to create this music, which had obviously so much like energy in it, which then led to her going on to like, you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, you just don't know. And sometimes being in your comfort zone, having everything in place is not the answer. Sometimes you need to be on the edge to be able to find the thing that really truly inspires you. Does that make sense?
No, 100%, mate. I mean, as you said, everyone's got their own path, and you don't really know what's in the corner. But yeah, it's interesting, mate. From the mental health perspective, I think the whole, not just running a business, but even the workplace career pathway is a very interesting topic. I think even off the back of it, this conversation, which has been very off the cuff, as you can probably tell if you're listening, it's just, I think it leads to, I'm already in my head thinking of a few people who I'd like to get on to talk maybe about certain aspects of maybe creating, like I'm thinking of a guy I know who's ridiculously good at productivity stuff and creating routines, and he's got the best processes and workflows ever. They're so simple when he does them, and you do it, you practice, like, that's, how have you thought of that? I can't comprehend how you've done that. But then when you try it, and that's so simple. But he doesn't do anything. He removes all obstacles. Anything's got any friction between doing anything, he'll find a solution for it. Anything in his day, but it'd be as simple as putting a task into his phone. If it takes longer than 2 clicks, he's like, I need to find a way around that. He'll make sure there's no friction. He doesn't use his mouse pad. He's found a way to do all the keyboard shortcuts where his hands never come off the keyboard. Because you just, the amount of time you lose clicking on a mouse. And I'm like for me to think of, have you seen that guy? There's a guy on social media, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He's an absolute unit, does gymnastic stuff as well. He's always jumping about. I can't remember his name on Instagram, but he's probably the most famous person I know who talks about it all the time. Keyboard shortcuts, basically always, everything is just using the keyboard, never uses the mouse. But I think there are little things, that's obviously an extreme example, but those sort of people and guests out there, we can come on and help people with some advice, and help us with some advice.
Oh my God, 100%. Like because I actually had a previous job. There's a guy called Brian who's from the US who I work with. Hello, Brian. He was mad about this stuff, and I think he was looking at me some days messing about. Like he was like, "What are you doing?" Like, and it was all about efficiency. It's all about efficiencies. And he put some basic, like when I used to, like, give one example, when you're in Gmail or something like that. When I used to get an email, let's say from Gary, I would make a Gary folder and then I drag it and drop it in there. And he looked at me one day doing that and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm putting it in my folder." Like, I thought I was being organized. And he was like, "You can create a keyboard shortcut which labels it, so I can go Shift 6 or whatever, and then it'll come up. What folder do you want to put in?" I go and I type G, and it'll come up Gary. Bam. So I literally go 2 taps on my finger, and it's in there. And
Aye.
and like there was a few other things like that. Like he taught me, like there was like saving things onto a clip. Like there's a plugin you can get into your Mac, so you can screenshot something.
Evernote does it. It's good.
Yeah, and then it's on a clipboard, and so you don't have to go like download the file, then like try and drag
Copy
it
and
in.
paste.
Yeah, and if you think about that, like that probably saves you like it could save you like 30 seconds, I'd say.
Oh, but if you're on a computer all day, 8 to 10 hours a day, it's just
Yeah.
The big thing is that there's a great book by Cal Newport called Deep Work. A lot of people might have heard of it. Brilliant. This guy's brilliant when it comes to about how to stay in that sort of flow state if you're studying or trying to get something done. But he talks about, obviously everyone thinks they can multitask, but if you change, so say right now I'm talking to you and then the missus walks upstairs, starts chatting to me, the time it takes me to recalibrate and come back to what we're talking about, say I'm right deep in a conversation, I don't know I can't remember the time he says, but it's a certain amount of time. So he says, if those little nano or microseconds of you constantly recalibrating, trying to get back in, you can never get into that workflow. So you end up getting a tenth of what you would get done, and it's subpar work because you're never really getting into that deep work state. Whereas if you just do, like, you probably heard of like Pomodoro's, like 25-minute spell of just nothing, even as simple as getting rid of your toolbar on top of your screen, so you can't click anything else, just full screen, no distractions. There's a clock, 25 minutes, do that, you'll get more done in that 25 minutes than you would if like you had like 2 tabs that open, you click between the both of them, and next thing you're Googling something, and then your phone goes off. You get nothing done in that time.
And do you know what, like for someone like who struggles with, like, let's say like mental health and things like that going in your head, when you do that, because I've had flushes of time where I've been good at that, more so when I was in corporate life. But if you come out of one of those sometimes, and the cool thing is when you get your head entrenched in something like that for a while, sometimes you come up for air, then it could be 2 hours later, which is great. It's mental, yeah. And you come up and you go, "Fuck, I was in that for 2 hours," and then you're like, but then you actually, but you always feel great after it. Like you don't feel. I think beforehand you think, "Oh, I can't spend 2 hours on that." No, like I've got all this other stuff to do. But if you actually go and do it and fall into that, and then you come out, you go, and then you feel great. You're like, "Fucking smash that! Did 2 hours? That was unreal." And then like your work is always better, and then you're like, "Oh, but then I'll go back into my email again," and then you're in that like that inertia and procrastination for business owners.
I think we could do a full podcast on procrastinating. I think we could probably better get some sort of expert guest on to talk about tools for that, because that would be a podcast.
Because you get procrastination, like as you're saying, you get the distractions, which then lends to procrastination because you get someone going, "Can you send me that logo image?" And then you go and you have to do that, and then someone's like, "Do we want to have a meeting with this?" So you have all those things, but then you have the things in your immediate environment. So I'm terrible at this. Like I'm always like, "Oh, I should really go for a pee. I haven't had a cup of tea in a couple of hours. Have a cup of tea. Then I'll sit down. Then I'll have a water. Then I'll have a snack. Yeah, then I'll just check Instagram for a second. Then you got to go for it.
It's 12:37. I can't start a task at 12:37. I'll start at 1 o'clock. So I give myself 23 minutes to kill
it. Yeah. Or then you're like, "That's Friday. I can't do like a strategic thing on a Friday. I'll leave that to Monday." Yeah. Good on you, Neil. Well done. That's smart.
Smart life, work balance, lovely.
Yeah, and then you're like, I've had times where like sometimes I don't know if anyone's like this. So you find an email in your drafts. So sometimes you think, right, I'm on top of things. Go. I used to have it in corporate where I think I'd have everything done. 6 o'clock, you got to go home, and as you're going to go home, you're about to shut down your thing, and a draft email comes up, and you're going, "Fuck, I was supposed to send this." Fuck, and then you're like, shy, and then you have to go and do that. So you have like those short-term ones, but then other times I've found things like a Microsoft Word doc which is open on my thing, and I started 3 months ago or something like that, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is really bad." Like, avoiding all that is bad. But there's another thing that sprung to mind as well, which is there's a book, there's a woman, I can't think of her name, but she's very famous for this, but she has like the 5 second rule. And this has been, I think,
Gretchen, not Gretchen Rubin. I can't remember her name. I know who you're talking about though.
yeah,
Melanie
it's like
something.
the 5 second rule. And like we had Nick, the CEO of the tier, who spoke something that was in a similar vein of this, of like the micro and macro moves. So you have like, and this is where like I love what you were talking about, like the simple things that you can do that aren't going to be too arduous. Like, you know, you've got a 16-page PDF on how not to procrastinate. To a procrastinator, you're going to procrastinate not to do that. Like that's the vicious cycle. But what I like about the 5 second rule and the micro macro moves, what Nick was saying, like if you're in bed and you wake up and you're like, oh, I could do it another half hour, or you could actually just make a small thing like put your foot outside the bed, and then all of a sudden you're up and then your day start and away you go. It's the same thing. The 5 second rule is like, should I go for a workout or should I not? And you go, give it 5 seconds, 1 to 3, and then make a decision one way or another. And then you almost won't have any guilt.
Fuck it. I'm going.
You know, but she lives like that woman who, like, she talks about, she's on Oprah and everything about like how it's like, honestly, it's a proven thing, like, because at least if you make a decision, this again goes back to being a business owner, procrastinating, the guilt, the stress. At least if you make, part of it is just making decisions. That's the hard part. And that's it that hangs over you. Like, whereas easy if you make a decision, even if it fucks up, you're like, well, you can't be annoyed. Yeah.
Usually if your decision is wrong, I feel like you take action quicker to rectify it. So you sort of got there anyway, a lot quicker than you would have just keep thinking about doubting, making that decision.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or like, if you're like, okay, like, just to give an example, oh, we're doing an EDM, let's do it this way. You do it, you go, fuck it, let's just do the way you do it. And it doesn't do well. It's like, fuck, well, I know that doesn't work anymore. So you can just bin that. And then you can go into the next thing. So like, you know, again, there's positives to all that. But yeah, I like, maybe like if someone wants to dip their toe in this, like just try that 5 second thing or try that micro macro move thing, because those micro changes, which is what Nick said, can lead to macro thing. And this is again going back to like problem solving. You think, you know, we spoke about the song analogy earlier on, all those kind of things. Break it down into micro things. So if you're like, if you think, right, I've got a big thing happening, how am I going to tackle it? Like, if you just break it into like basic steps or modules, like, you know, like if someone said to you, like, think of marathon runners, like, you know, if you're like, right, you got to run a marathon, it's 42 kilometers, like, like that's what puts people off. But if you actually just break it down into going like kilometer by kilometer, whatever, like it always goes, like, you know, I guarantee you most people who do a marathon for the first time, it's never as bad as what you think it's going to be on paper before, you know, or triathlon or all that kind of stuff. I'm sure there is, like, you know, you do put yourself through it. But yeah, I think if you break things down into small sections, you'll end up at the end goal, you know. Whereas if you try and tackle the end goal as one big beast, like, you know, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, well, and I think. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I had one other. This is a lot of analogies, I know, but I presented this to like the Nimbus team before, where it's like when they landed on the moon in 1969, you would just presume their trajectory was like straight line to the moon. But if you actually look at the charts, which I think is available on like NASA or whatever, they had to use propulsion like engines, so it's like bursts.
Yeah.
So they do all these little bursts. So if you actually look at their trajectory, it's like a complete zigzag. So they burst and it goes forward. Then they have to recalibrate. They burst again. So it's a really lovely analogy of like, to get to the moon is not a linear line. It goes like this. And it's the exact same for you and anything that you do. Like if you think it's going to be linear, like you're wrong, and that's okay. And you need to recalibrate. So, you know, there's another one. There's another locker or another tool for your toolkit, guys. All free. We could be charging like $1,000 an hour for all this.
I mean, someone somewhere is probably charging a fortune for just giving it an analogy to people. Anyway, I think
the analogy doctors. That's a new name.
You can use that one, guys. I think that was. I mean, that off. Like as I said, that was off on all sorts of tangents. It was off the cuff, but I think hopefully, if you're thinking of running a business, or you do run a business, or you're just interested in that, got something from that. I'd be actually interested to know if anyone who's listening's got some tips or tricks or things they do or things they find difficult or they can also relate to. Always interested. Some people do drop us messages on Instagram, direct messages with thoughts on things that have happened in episodes. So,
and do you know what the other last bit of fleeting advice I'd give is like the same with mental health. Like when we did the light ball a few years ago, this guy called Colin who owns the Doss House, which is like a whiskey bar in Sydney. Yeah, it's brilliant. He said this fucking brilliant line. We did a vox pop with him on the red carpet when we had the black tie event. And he said, if you're out there and you're struggling with mental health and you can solve it entirely on yourself, good on you. Like, credit to you, and I hope that continues. But he said, like that's probably the rarity. So seeking advice is actually a strength, not a weakness. And it's the exact same with business. Like as I said, people don't see this on Instagram, but like I'm currently working with a men's empowerment coach. I had this like really expensive, like which costs like that's an expensive thing. It's not like free or anything like that. Going back 6 or 7 years ago, I got awarded this coaching thing, which was like a 10 session thing, which fucking changed my life. I go to psychologist, sometimes I take medication. Like, I have we have multiple business mentors. We also have like other businesses in our network of friends, and like, even the likes of you, Gary, we would like chat to stuff about something. Like we were just chatting about apps that Gary found beforehand, which he's passed on to me. Like, to think that you can go through business like entirely by yourself, like, is just like, it's just not true.
What is it? I mean, I'm just throwing a wee scene in here to join the gang, but if you want to go, if you want to go far, alone or something like that, want to go far, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I know the one you're thinking. Yeah, like yeah.
Somebody right now shouting at the radio. Fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you go together, you can go far. Something like that. But that's it.
You're not going to go very far by yourself.
And if you think about a pie, like a pie, or another analogy is like wearing the hats as a business owner. Okay.
We're fucking back this is the last analogy that we're getting to. Fuck.
Someone cut his mic. Now, when you start as a business owner, you wear all these hats, right? You're the marketer, you're the accountant, you're the front of house, you're all these same things. And it's like, or think of it like as a pie, and then as you grow, you have to start taking the hats off because you can't do everything yourself. Like, and that's hard as a founder or owner when you're like, well, this is my baby. Like, I need things to look a certain way. And that's a hard thing to let go and trust it to somebody else. But you have to do that. You can't bear it all yourself. And also thinking of the pie, like you have this, as I said, you kind of do all those things to start off. But I know I'm not a finance guy. Like, I'm fucking brutal at that. Like, receipts, like reconciliation, all those things. Like it's dangerous giving me cards. And like, you've got like, sometimes that pie, you might only have one little slice that really is what you're good at. Like, so like, you need to at some point realize that like, okay, it could be marketing or whatever, like that's my thing, and just focus on that. Let the other people who are the experts in that do those things, because that's the only way you're going to grow. Trust me, you cannot grow trying to do it all yourself. No way. So you need to let go, which is actually one of the hardest things you can do as a business owner.
Perfect, mate. We'll wrap up there before you give another.
One more analogy I have is
about wrapping things up. Anyway, cool. So hope you enjoyed this little all over the place episode.
We live analogy podcast.
Aye, decent. Anyway, we'll be back. So we've got a few other guests lined up, so we'll have some other guests come up in this season 2. This is a wee different one. I think we'll do some different ones, maybe shorter ones, maybe 20-30 minute episodes. I mean, they'll have less classes.
Yeah, Gary came up with a good idea of like with season 1, we've always had a guest and an expert in their field, which is great. But for season 2, we might try and go deeper on single topics, so we could just chat about experiences, like real life experiences that hopefully people can relate to, and also just chatting to people who are average Australians or anyone in the world. Like, you don't have to be an expert, so we're hoping going to speak to a lot of everyday people on the show about their trials and tribulations. And that is my little son in the background. So that is the universe saying, "Shut up, Neil, and be a dad."
Right, sound mate, I'll let you go.
All right. Cheers, Gary.
Brilliant.
Nice seeing your face. All right. Chat to you, mate. Okay. Bye.